welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessica. I am here with one of our favorite repeat guests. Please introduce yourself and tell us about what we will be chatting about today.
Hi again. This is Ryan Estrada, and I am a cartoonist and author who you've heard ramble about a lot of topics on this podcast before. And we'll be talking about, I don't know, all kinds of stuff. We might talk about my new book that's coming out on May 2nd called Occulted. And then, there's been some weird news about my books recently that I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah, there really has. Let's start with Occulted. So this is something that I remember the first time you had mentioned it. It sounded extremely interesting, and then I read it, and it was extremely interesting. So this is a collaboration with somebody, and it is a story about something that happened to her growing up. Do you want to chat a little bit about Occulted?
Yeah, another amazing story. I get so lucky that people in my life just have these stories that they're willing to work with me and let me help share. As we were working at BAM Book Club, I'd already learned about my wife, being hunted down by the police for reading banned books. And then a friend of ours named Amy Rose, it was actually at a storytelling event that I put on here in Busan. And it was, the story event was called NDA. And the joke of it was that everyone that went in had to sign an NDA so people could tell their deepest secret stories. And they could never talk about it outside. And Amy told the story that she'd never told in public before. And it was like, when you go to a show like that, it's at a bar, people are chatting, people are in the back ordering their drinks, not everyone's paying attention. When Amy finished her story, the room was silent. And then everyone started crying. And I was just because of my joke that I made, it was just like a shtick to get people in the door. But I can't talk about this outside of the room. This is an amazing story. And then eventually I talked to Amy about the idea of turning it into a comic, and she loved it. So basically what happened is Amy Rose grew up in a cult just down the road from Heaven's Gate. And she did not know she grew up in a cult because, that's what happens. You grow up in a cult. You only know what they tell you. And her dream was to be a scientist, but she was not allowed to study science. She was only allowed to study science fiction because they taught her Star Trek was real. There was an interplanetary group of aliens controlling everything, and Gandhi was one of them. He was a space alien. And it wasn't until she started reading banned books that she learned everything she'd been taught was a lie, and that she learned that she was in a cult. And the book is all about how she escaped.
So first of all, after the book was so good, and it was interesting because it kind of sent me down a rabbit hole. I had absolutely no idea how many Star Trek related cults there actually are. And it's pretty wild to think that somebody as a child would grow up in something like that. I was in high school when Heaven's Gate happened, and you think about these situations. I mean, everybody in Heaven's Gate, which was horrible, everyone was an adult. There didn't seem to be any children in the mix. But then when you hear about how pervasive these situations are, it just blows your mind. But I think one of the things that I really loved about reading Occulted was you would think that her relationship with science fiction would be bad because this was sort of like the world, it was kind of like used to deceive her, but in a way, but between that and banned books, like it almost like gave her strength to get through it. And I thought that that was amazing.
Yeah, we also worked together while we were working on Occulted. We did a comic for StarTrek.com about the more Star Trek aspects of it. And she talked about how, it was the lessons that she learned from that show and like that also helped her escape and just showed her what it means to care and to think critically and yeah, just all these lessons that she learned from all these things. And the hope is that kids can read this book. Maybe they're not in a cult, but any sort of situation they're in where they're being controlled, it just teaches kids to, or anyone, to recognize the signs of that and know when they're in a situation that's dangerous and when they're being manipulated, like Amy was.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting. We've had a few people, a few authors on the podcast who have been, who did grow up in cults. And I think like what you had said earlier on and what you just said really is one thing that's always universal, is that number one, when you're a child growing up in this, you're not in a cult. Like this isn't a
Mhm.
cult. This is just the way things are. There's nothing unusual about this until you get to a point where you are kind of given something that helps you realize, actually, yes, this is an unhealthy, unsafe environment. And I think the other thing is just the importance of having something that can sort of help you realize that you are being manipulated, because it's it's not easy, especially because you want approval from your elders, you want approval from your parents, the people your parents respect, and yeah. So the art in Occulted was gorgeous. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, we have an amazing artist, another friend of ours here in Busan, named Jungmin Lee, who I love her work. She's an illustrator. She'd never made a comic before, and then one day, a group of us had a 12-hour comic day, which is just a lazy person's version of Scott McCloud's 24-hour comic day. And a lot of people made their very first comic that day, and Min was one of them. And at the end of the day, I look at it and I'm like, man, this is one of my favorite comics I've ever read. How is this your first comic? And then right after that, we had already been pitching Occulted, and originally I was going to illustrate it. And Spike from Iron Circus came to me and was like, it's kind of a really serious, like haunting story, and your characters are kind of like goofy looking. Is it possible to make it look more serious? And I'm like, I don't think it is. I'm not that good an artist. I can only draw goofy looking dorks. Uh, but I just discovered that my good friend Jungmin Lee has a haunting but adorable style that would fit perfectly. And she's like, looked at her art and said, "Great, this is it. Let's get her on board." So I'm always teasing Min that she's so good she got me fired from my own book.
Yeah, that's wow. That's pretty interesting. But you seem pretty good-natured about it, that it was the right choice.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I absolutely love working with other artists, especially if they're like as talented as Min is, and just being able to like the collaboration of it, just handing a script off to someone and then seeing it like come back to you looking as beautiful as it does is amazing. And also, I'm very lazy, and I didn't have to draw it all, so I feel great about it.
Well, I do have to say, I did, while I was researching, I did also find the Star Trek comic that you and Amy
Mm.
did, which was very, very good, and a good companion piece almost to Occulted, which talks also just a lot about, Amy's family situation and how, she ended up there. And I think I think like it's a really good read, and I think it's a coming of age story, for a lot of people, like you said, whether or not like you're just sort of being manipulated or whether or not you're just being fed something or in an unsafe environment, it's a coming of age story in an extreme way, but also in a very sweet way. So I also wanted to talk, like you mentioned, about how banned books kind of played into that, and just the idea of banned books, because things have
Mm.
been getting a little crazy, and I know you have a lot to say about the topic.
Yeah, well, as we mentioned, banned books are what like got Amy out of the situation. But of course, we talked before about my book, Banned Book Club, which has recently been banned in Florida. So that's fun. Clay County, Florida. It's there's one organization. A lot of the articles say they're banned because of one man, which isn't the full truth, because it is one guy doing it, and it's important to show that that's what the law allows. But he's like the head of an organization that works closely with a lot of other organizations that are trying to do this all across the U.S. And he has this list of over 3,000 books he's trying to ban. He's already successfully done hundreds of them. But the reason that makes it so easy to do in Florida is they recently changed the law so that it's not like the normal process of someone challenges a book and then there's discussions about it. In Florida now, as soon as one person complains about a book, it's immediately removed from shelves. And it's not until they have a meeting to discuss the book can they decide if it'll ever be allowed back. And I don't know how long Banned Book Club was taken off shelves. I only found out about it a few days before the meeting when they allowed it to go back. So Banned Book Club is back on shelves, but it is uh, along with a list of many other books that are not so lucky. There's a lot of books that were sent back to review, and there are a number of books that just were straight up without any review. They decided these books are illegal. Even our adult team of book researchers cannot dare look at this filthy pornography. And it's like one of them is Ready Player One. Just like, it's a kid who plays video games. Steven Spielberg made a movie about it. Like, I don't get it. And of course, there are also a lot of really life-changing books about, coming of age, about queer people that are just taken away from kids in there. So I've even though Banned Book was back on shelves, it's this is of course a topic that I've been passionate about like ever since we started writing Banned Book Club, and just talking to my wife and researching and interviewing all these people that gave their freedom, gave huge parts of their lives, people who went to jail for fighting for banned books. It's something I've realized how important it is and am fighting for it. But now that like we've gotten involved, I'm getting even more active and trying to help as much as I can and let every organization and library that's facing us know that like I'm at their service. I'm here to do anything I can to help. Yeah, it's been a real weird week.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what people can do about this? As you mentioned, this is in Florida. It's easier because the law was changed. But this is kind of an initiative that has been spreading throughout the country. So what are some things that you think that in your experience or in the experiences you've been having can be done when these situations come up?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things anyone should do to protect books is just make sure you have your library card. Make sure your library card's up to date, get it, and then just start checking out books. And if you hear about books that are banned, check them out. Uh, because if that book is, even if it's banned elsewhere, these things are spreading all across the US, and all these organizations know each other and they just copy paste each other's lists. So if it's banned one place, it's going to be challenged somewhere else. And if your library can show like this many people have checked out this book, people in our community want this book here, who knows if that's going to help. Every place is different, but showing that the community cares about this book and gets use out of it is important. And then just when things like this happen, or even before they happen, go to your local school board meetings. If you have kids in a district, go to these meetings and just give some positivity. There's so many people that go to these meetings to just scream at teachers and scream at librarians and call them the grossest names that I'm not going to repeat on a podcast to tell the story. Like, just say the most awful things you could ever say about a human being because they allowed a book to be on the shelf that has two dads in it, or two penguins that are boys, or even a book about sex education. And the thing is, no one's at these meetings countering it. So these board members that are just hearing angry people scream at them just say, well, I guess this is how the people feel. So if you're able to go to a meeting and just be like, hey, I think it's cool that the librarians and teachers are sticking up for our kids. And if someone's there to like counter what these people are saying, because I've been watching a lot of the videos and reading a lot of the posts that they do. And it's really interesting, like, especially having read Banned Book Club. That's what makes it so ironic, is that Banned Book Club it was written about the 1980s Korea. And we wrote it before any of this started happening in America. Yet it like describes everything they're doing like beat for beat, which is, I think, maybe might have encouraged them to want it banned because it's showing their playbook. But, in Korea, it was always, we're not banning important. We're just banning communist propaganda. And of course, well, that's funny because my buddy just went to prison for reading a book about democracy. And, another guy got in trouble for reading a Jack London book. Someone else got in trouble for reading Brown Bear, What Do You See? Because you confused Bill Martin and Bill Martin Jr., who are very different authors. But now in America, they're saying, oh, well, we're just banning pornography in schools. That's all we want to take care of. And they love sharing the exact same two screen. They don't even take their own screenshot. They copy and paste someone else's screenshot of two different sex education books that are very excellent resources for teens. But they post those screenshots and say, this is what they're showing to 4-year-olds, which is a lie. That's not what they're showing to 4-year-olds. These are not in the children's section. These are specifically for older teens who need sex education books. And then you look at the list and you're like, well, that's funny because this is a children's book about penguins, and this is a book about dumplings that apparently, because it's Asian food, it's too woke because we're not eating hamburgers. I don't know what's going on. It's just like this organization that banned our book. I have a copy of their dossier that they list every book they want to get to banning and all the books they have banned and all their notes. And it's so many books. Like, what on here is pornography? I don't see it. And some of the people were in my comments being like, we're trying to get the pornography out of schools. And I'm like, well, can you tell me where the pornography is in this book? He's like, I'm not doing your research for you. I'm like, well, I've already done the research. I wrote the book. Just tell me where it is in the book. And then he just goes off on a rant that he's copy pasted for someone else. And I'm like, so that's your conversation. All right. I don't know what to tell you, guy.
Right. Yeah, no, there's definitely that's definitely been something for sure. I think another question I kind of had, actually, just about Banned Book Club in general. Are you doing a follow-up to it? Is that something? I know in the past we talked about it.
Yeah. Hyunsik and I actually just finished. I don't know, we'll see it on the podcast, but I'll show you. I just finished penciling No Rules Tonight. It weighs 15.6 pounds.
There is okay, so you can't see it because this is a video. This is not a video podcast, even though Ryan and I can see each other. But that was a massive stack of papers. Wow.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it's about a group of kids. I didn't realize until drawing it that like there were a lot of panels where there's like 13 characters in a panel at once. So I had to draw it very big. So It's very heavy. But yeah, we're working on a book called No Rules Tonight. And it's more stories of Hyunsuk's college days, and it takes place on Christmas Eve. And it originally was pitched as a joke. I'm like, what if we did a band book club Christmas special about a country where they don't celebrate Christmas? But they do celebrate December 24th. It was a very different holiday in Korea back when the dictator was in charge, and they had a curfew because there was a curfew. If you went out after midnight, you would go to jail for the night. And the only exceptions were holidays. Most of the holidays, of course, you have stuff to do with your family. You can't do anything. But because the U.S. military started the curfew, one of the things they put at the beginning was that Christmas Eve was an exception. And since no one here celebrated Christmas, that was the one night of the year that they could do whatever they wanted. And so of people in Hyunsuk's generation, there are a lot of September babies. I'll just say that. And so it was a night of freedom. And so that's what this book is about. It's about what if you had one night of freedom to do whatever you wanted. And yeah, it's a lot of the characters people know from Band Book Club, and some new characters having their own little nighttime adventures on a mountain. And yeah, so that's what we've been working on as our follow-up.
Well, I am super, super excited to hear about that. Am I correct that you're going to be at ALA this year?
Yes, I am.
Oh, very cool.
I'm leaving soon for a big old cross-country month-and-a-half tour. I'll be going to the U.S. Book Show, I believe the American Booksellers Association, and ALA, Ann Arbor Comics Art Festival, and lots of other bookstore stops in between. So I'm very excited to be back and talking about books.
Well, thank you so much. Hopefully, some of our listeners can meet you there. And please pick up Occulted, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for your library, whether it's for somebody else. Not only is it an important story, but it is also a very good story. And I think, there's really something for everybody. It's a very, very good coming of age story, and the art is gorgeous.
And just like with Band Book Club, we really wanted it to not be about the cult or the rules of the cult. Like, all of the stories I try to write are about, like, for me, the history is what interrupts the character's life. And so it's about Amy trying to live her life and trying to be a cute, nerdy science kid and trying to manage that in a difficult situation. So I hope people like that. And yeah, like you said, if you're going to ALA, come hang out with us. And Hyunsuk will actually be there on the Friday. So if you can find us on Friday, we're going to have special badge ribbons that say Band Book Club member, and Hyunsuk will personally induct you in her Band Book Club, like a little on the floor knighting ceremony.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much, Ryan. This is Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast, and we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.